Hi girls, it's Mrs. Vasquez. Hopefully you're enjoying your kind of surprise 4-day weekend. Possibly 5. We'll have to keep an eye on the weather tomorrow. But because we have had missed class time yesterday and today, and possibly tomorrow, I do want to catch us up on the notes. We are almost done, but I do want to kind of get ahead as much as I can while we're out of school. And then when we come back to class, you can of course ask any questions on this video. And we're going to be talking about sex-linked traits, and we'll review if you have any questions on what I'm saying or the practice problem we're going to be doing in this video. We'll go over it in class, but I did want to get kind of some of the notes down out of the way so we can move forward when we come to class. So at this point, I'd like you to take notes on this video as you would in class. If you don't have your bio notebook or your bio binder, that's okay. Just grab a piece of loose leaf or computer paper and write the notes down, and you can always add it into your binder or staple it, tape it into your notebook. Okay, so just a reminder that after we talked about Mendel and his observations with pea plants, we then spent some time talking about exceptions to his rules, things that we've seen years later in more complex organisms that don't necessarily follow what we say Mendelian genetics. The way that Mendel observed. And so we started with incomplete dominance, examples of codominance. We left off with polygenic inheritance, where more than 2 genes are controlling a trait. And now we're going to do the final and fourth one, which is sex-linked traits. Okay, so just a reminder, some background. We have 46 chromosomes, so every single cell in the human body has 46 chromosomes. But remember that we also, in meiosis, talked about how every chromosome out of that 46 has a homologous pair. That's what they pair up with to make tetrads in meiosis. So one chromosome out of your 46 has a homologous pair. So the one that you inherited from your mom has a homologous pair, which is the one you inherited from your dad. But they're matching in size, they're matching in the types of genes that they carry. And so when we're referring to that, we say that the first 22 pairs, so 22 out of the 23 pairs, are what we call autosomal chromosomes. This basically just means they're not related to your sex. They're not sex-linked. They're basically regular chromosomes. And so pretty much everything we've talked about so far have been traits that are on autosomal chromosomes, the first 22 pairs. But what we're going to be talking about today is that 23rd pair, so chromosome number 45 and 46. And the 23rd pair is known as the sex chromosomes, and there's 2 types of sex chromosomes. The first type is called the X chromosome, and the second type is called the Y chromosome. And so depending on what combination of these 2 chromosomes you have, that will determine whether you're going to develop into a male or a female when you're still an embryo and a fetus. Okay, so if you are a female, I'm sure many of you guys, I've heard you guys mention this in class, but so I'm sure many of you guys know, but females have 2 copies of the X chromosome, and males are going to have a copy of each. So only males have the Y chromosome. So there's something I can do with this recording program where I can edit. So let me see if this will work. Okay, so female, whoops. No, don't want to do that. Freehand. Okay, so ignore this yellow box. Okay, so females have an XX. So if you inherit a copy of the X chromosome from mom and you inherit a copy of the X chromosome from dad, you are going to develop into a female. And then if an embryo or a baby inherits an X chromosome from mom and a Y chromosome from dad, this baby will start developing into a male. Okay, and these chromosomes are so important because this is going to be what's going to influence our gender development, our sex development, and of course, and our reproductive organs. Okay, so the only thing about this program that I don't necessarily know how to do yet is how to keep this writing here, because every time that I exit, it goes away. So anyway, so if I write in the future, I'll be writing again when we do some practice problems, pause it and copy down the answers, and then when they go away, it hopefully won't be that big of a deal. Okay, so what's interesting is that the traits that are what we call sex-linked, so traits that are found specifically on the sex chromosomes, most of these traits are going to be found on the X chromosome, not the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is much smaller, and the only genes that it really has to do with male development, testosterone. So these are not genes that really are important to both males and females. But the X chromosome does have genes that are important to both genders. The traits that are found on the X chromosome are not really sex related. So things like color blindness, baldness, hemophilia, which is a blood disorder. These are things that don't necessarily affect the reproductive organs or have to do with your gender, but they're found on the sex chromosome. And so what's interesting is that females have 2 copies of the X chromosome, but males only have 1. So if you have on the X chromosome, let's say, let's talk about color blindness. If females have 1 healthy X and 1 X that has the gene for color blindness, females are going to be carriers, so they're still not going to show that colorblind phenotype. They're still going to have normal eyesight. Males, however, only have 1 copy of the X chromosome. So if they inherit a copy that's defected, or they have a copy that has the gene for color blindness or baldness, they're going to show it. So males don't have the ability to be carriers. They're going to express that trait, even if it's recessive. They're going to express it because they only have 1 copy of it. Okay, so that's what the last bullet is saying. Genes on the X chromosome will always be expressed in males, whether it's dominant or not, and that's why traits like color blindness and baldness, for example, are more associated with men, because men are more likely to have these traits. Females have an extra X, so there's another chance for them to have a healthy X. Okay, oh, and I just realized that you can't see the bottom of this, but I want to, still can't see the bottom of this. Okay, but write down these examples. So I mentioned hemophilia. Hemophilia is a blood disorder. People who are hemophiliacs. So normally when you bleed, the bleeding eventually stops and you form a scab. People of hemophilia, though, their blood isn't able to clot very easily. And so they can, even if it's a very minor cut, like you just scratch yourself, you can bleed for long periods of time because hemophiliacs don't have that clotting factor. And before modern medicine, people actually would die from hemophilia because they wouldn't be able to stop the bleeding. Color blindness is not as serious. And there's different types of color blindness, as we've talked about earlier in the year. And then baldness is another example. What we're going to be doing, though, is practicing some Punnett squares. So when you're doing Punnett squares and you want to predict whether your offspring will have traits that are sex-linked, something different you have to do with the Punnett square is, instead of doing just, capital B, lowercase b, or using regular letters, sex-linked traits use the actual letters of the chromosomes. And so because they're sex-related. And so for a father, you're always going to have the XY, and a mother is how you're always going to have XX. So how do you distinguish whether an X is a healthy X or if it has the trait in question, like color blindness or baldness? Well, in this particular picture, they're color coding it. So the X, let's see, red X is going to have, this is going to be a Punnett square that's looking at hemophilia and whether these 2 parents can pass on hemophilia to their kids. A red X is going to indicate an X chromosome that has hemophilia gene. And the black X is going to be a healthy X chromosome that carries a normal blood clotting factor. Okay, so you might not always have color distinguishing, the distinguishing between these two might not always be color related. We're going to see another problem. You also could have superscripts, so an X capital B or an X lowercase b, sort of like in blood that we were talking about earlier. Okay, so in this Punnett square, what are we looking at? So father is obviously XY because he's a male, but the X is red. So does this father have hemophilia or is he normal? Well, it tells you the red X is the chromosome carrying hemophilia, so this father has hemophilia. This mother, however, is healthy, 2 black X's. So let's look at the offspring. So if these 2 parents mated, what are the possibility of offspring they could have? So remember, just like flipping a coin, there's a 50% chance of having a girl and 50% chance of having a boy in any reproductive situation. And so it kind of makes sense that 2 of these boxes will be females, 50%, and 2 of these boxes will be males, also 50%. But out of the female, so if they were to have a girl, what's the percentage of their girl having hemophilia? Well, both of these genotypes are exactly the same, with 1 black dominant X and 1 red X. And so none of their daughters, if they were to have a daughter, would have hemophilia, but all of their daughters would be carriers for hemophilia. Males, however, remember, males inherit the Y from their dad. So in this case, this Y, if you follow my mouse, this Y was inherited from dad. this X was inherited from mom. And because mom is healthy, she only has healthy X's to give. So if they have a son, all their sons will be healthy. Okay, so, I want to move this back again. Okay, so practice problems. We're going to be looking at another example. This is not humans, this is actually fruit flies, a type of fly. So fruit flies, their eye color can either be red, as in this picture over here, or they could be white in this picture over here. Red is dominant to white, so red is going to be capital R and white is going to be a lowercase r. So for number one, I want you to try to label the descriptions of each of these genotypes. So you have to figure out two things. You have to figure out the sex or the gender. So you find that out by looking at the X's or the Y's. If it's two X's, it's female. If it's an X and Y, it's a male. And the second piece of information you have to figure out is what is the eye color. So now you can read it sort of like how you would with Mendelian Punnett squares. If it's a capital R, it's going to be red. If it's two lowercase r's, it's going to be white, because red is dominant over white. Okay, so pause this video, try to answer all the questions, and then play it again and I'll give you the answers. Okay, so let me try to use my pen again. Okay, so in this case, we have X big R, X little r. This is going to be a female. Oop, this is going to be harder to write than I thought. Female and red, because we have one capital R and red is the dominant. Oops, okay. X big R, Y. So this is a male because we have an X and a Y, and it's going to be a male with red eyes because of the capital R. Okay, so red male. I'm just going to put an M for male. And then X little r, so it's a female, but an F for females will be quicker. And little r, that's going to be white eyes because they're completely recessive. X big R, well, it's going to be a female, and it's going to be a female with red eyes because of the capital R. And the last one is going to be a male. Notice this male up here has a big R, but now this male has a lowercase r, so this male is going to have white eyes. Okay, so now pause the video again, and I want you to answer all the questions for number two. You're doing the opposite here. So you're going to be given the description, and now you have to come up with the genotype. So is it an XY or XX, and then capital R or or lowercase r. Okay, so pause the video. And when you're ready to find out the answers, you can play it. So now I'm going to tell you the answers. So we'll start with gender first. So because it's a male, we know it's going to be an XY. And because he's white eyes, and white eyes is recessive, and well, there's only one copy, so we put a lowercase r. Remember, this is only on the X chromosome. Y chromosomes don't have these genes, so we don't put any letter next to them. Okay, red-eyed female, so it's a female, so we know it's going to be XX. And because it's red and heterozygous, two different alleles, well, one of those X's will be the red, and one of them will be the other allele. All right, female again, so we have XX. White eyes is recessive, so in order to show that white eyes, we have to have both of the X's, having a lowercase r. And then male, we know, is XY. And he has red eyes, so that X has a capital R. Okay, so if you have any questions on these, bring them into class. We'll go over these again, but write down these answers so you have them. What we're going to be doing next, and this is the last slide of the notes. Oopsie, I'm going to have to exit and restart. Not sure why they don't save. What we're going to be doing next is the last part of the notes is we're going to be doing a practice Punnett square problem, just like in the previous picture that we saw. But now we're going to be looking at a sex-linked trait in humans. So back to hemophilia. So remember, hemophilia is a sex-linked trait. Females can be normal. So in this case, they don't color code with letters. They're going to do like the fruit flies. They're going to have a capital H for normal and a lowercase h for hemophilia. So a normal female is going to be capital H for both. A female can also be normal but also be a carrier. That's when she's heterozygous but will still show a healthy trait. but females that are hemophiliacs have to have both recessive H's. Males, however, if they have only one copy of the normal H, they're going to be normal. If they have only one copy of the lowercase h, they're going to be a hemophiliac. And that's because they only have one X. So whatever allele they get, that's what they're expressing. Okay, so males can never be carriers. So this is our question. A woman who has hemophilia marries a normal man. How many of their children will have hemophilia, and what is their sex? So let's figure out the genotypes first. So a woman who has hemophilia, okay, here's our Punnett square set up. A woman who has hemophilia, okay, I have my pen. Okay, so a woman is XX. If she has hemophilia, remember up here, she's going to be X little h and X little h. All right, so let's actually just put her up here. X little h. It's going to take me a while to write this, so if you want to fast forward and just see my writing, you can do that too. Marries a normal man, so a man definitely is going to be an XY. But then what kind of X does he have? Well, if he's normal, he must have a capital H. And so that's going to be his genotype. So it's going to be this one over here. And now you just fill it in just like you would any other Punnett square. So here we have XX. Here's capital from this one. And then up here we have a lowercase. Here we have X big H and X little h. And now we have, oh, also when you are writing a male genotype, always put the X's first. Remember, alphabetical order. Okay, so X little h y, and then X little h y. Okay, so the question is saying how many of their children will have hemophilia? So let's answer that one first. So let's see, hemophilia. Which ones? So you can pause the video and try to figure out yourself and then play it, or you can just play along. So we have one box. This is a male that will have hemophilia because he's only a lowercase h. This is the same genotype. So 50% of their children will have hemophilia. The other 50% are going to be carriers because there's one big H and one little h. And what is the gender? So notice all the boxes that show hemophilia are the sons because there's a Y here. All their daughters are going to be carriers. And so what's interesting is that because the mom is the one with hemophilia, she only has hemophilia X's to give. And so because the son inherits an X from the mother, he only has 100% chance of getting hemophilia because that's what the mother's giving him. And so sons that, or boys I should say in general, that have sex-linked traits, like if they're bald or if they're colorblind or if they have hemophilia, what's another example? I'll have to think some others, give them to you in class. They always are because they're passed on by the mother, not the father. The father is only giving the Ys, and that's not a sex-linked trait. Okay, so write this Punnett square down, copy down, fill it in, write the answer, so how many will have hemophilia and what is their gender. And then when we come into class tomorrow, we're going to move on, but you'll have a chance to ask these questions. We'll talk a little bit more about sex-linked traits. The other part of your homework that I'd like you to do for tomorrow or even Thursday if we have no school on Wednesday, I want you to finish the genetics packets that I gave you guys in class. Okay, if you left your packet at home, hopefully you have it with you because, you know, for review and just practicing for March exams. If you don't have it, let me know. I can send you a copy of it. I have to look to make sure I have a copy, but if you have the packet, start doing as much as you can. Okay, so thank you for listening to this video. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day off and are ready to come back to work. When we come back to school, we have a lot of work to do to get ready for March exams. Okay, see you guys soon.